Look, I think we're done here, so... I mean, obviously, I can't say anything official right now, but you should expect a phone call.
Thank you. I just find it so difficult to boast on my CV. It's just that, as a Christian, I...
Oh.
What?
You're a...
Christian.
Yeah, okay.
Is that a...
No, not at all. Could you just give me a second, please?
Oh, Patricia, how wonderful to meet you. Do you know, we're all so excited that you've applied for this role. It's really very flattering when somebody of your caliber... Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a problem with me being a Christian, isn't there?
Absolutely not, legally speaking.
But you both seem uncomfortable for some reason. Do you think that it makes me untrustworthy?
No.
Incompetent?
Mm-mm.
A bit weird? I see. Well, in that case, I'll just withdraw my application.
Oh, now.
It's funny, isn't it? It's been perfectly normal to be a Christian in this country for the last 1,500 years or so. But now, well...
I'm really sorry about this.
It's fine. I forgive you.
Hello, my name is Lucy. I am not real, I'm more like a figment of Daryl's imagination. I will be your co-host this evening. Tonight is the third part in the Ready to Defend Your Faith series. So, welcome to the Rational Defense of Faith.
I want to thank you guys for toughing out the rain. A beautiful crowd here, a fired up crowd I can see already. I am honored that you are here, and I want to welcome everyone who is watching online for the first time, our first streaming event ever. Say a shout out to the people online. Yes. We've had upwards of 100,000 people watching our videos online, so it may be that you get filmed here tonight. We're excited about how it's gone in the last year. Our last year was an amazing year. We had a lot of people with a lot of lives changed. We heard a lot of stories of people whose worldviews were flipped upside down. And I want you guys to know, and I know what some of you guys do, my mother passed away on April 8th. And that is the reason we haven't had an event up until this time this year. And I actually thought about not doing any events this year because my sisters are here. It required so much to take care of her. But I know from talking to her in the last months of her life that she would want me up here telling you what God has provided for us to discover. So I am dedicating this night to her. Tonight is the third part in our Ready to Defend series. In this series, we equip believers to defend our faith, to be able to respond to common claims that we hear that seem to conflict with what we believe. What we do not believe here is in teaching people just to argue with atheists. If you are here and you're an atheist, if you're here and you don't believe, you are welcome here. I am glad that you're here. In fact, the way that we represent ourselves reflects the Creator that we represent. 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you the reason for the hope that you have. But many people overlook the next part. It says, do this with gentleness and respect. The New American Standard Version calls this gentleness and reverence. Reverence. As a music producer, I spend a lot of time with people who do not believe the way that I believe. And I tell you, I have great relationships with every one of them. I'm talking about gay artists, lesbian artists, transgender, criminals, guys who've been in and out of prison, atheists, all of them. And I can tell you that some of my friends say that they would kill for me. And if you knew these guys, you'd be worried. I have great relationships with every one of them. For all of us in here tonight, our first priority should be to love and not just debate. If you ask me, if you have a choice whether to buy dinner for these people or to debate with them, I'm going to choose dinner every time. You know why? Because good Mexican food goes a lot farther than debate. In the last event, I talked about how we initially approach people. And that is, instead of making claims about how right we are, we simply ask questions. Why? Because questions require answers. Answers require evidence. Questions cut through pretensions. Questions reveal assumptions. Questions illuminate why we would believe what we actually believe. This is the Socratic method. We use two primary questions when we talk to people. First, what do you mean by that? Second, have you ever considered the following? And chances are the person that you're talking to has been told that there is evidence to support their belief. But it turns out a lot of times they don't actually know what that evidence is. That's why questions are so effective. Tonight, you are going to see videos from other events, and you'll see a screen like this play up behind me. And this is going to tell you what event that video clip is from, all right? And they are all available tonight. We have 100 DVDs to give away, and thanks to the crossing, every one of you guys will be able to watch all of our videos online. As you saw in the video, today our beliefs are under attack. There's a spirit that permeates through our culture that says belief in God is not scientific, that it denies the evidence. Atheists have adopted certain terms like free thinking, reason, and critical thinking. A good example of this is a website for an atheist summer camp. On this site, it says that they provide educational adventure shaped by fun, friends, and free thought. On their values, they teach integrity, empathy, creativity, and critical thinking. Now let me tell you, I agree with all of that. I agree with critical thinking, though I will probably not get a job at that camp. In today's culture, atheists and skeptics have adopted these terms, suggesting that reason and critical thinking belong to only those who do not believe. This is not true. We embrace in here tonight critical thinking. What we use is called the inference to the best explanation. When we look at the evidence, what is the best explanation for the evidence? The unadulterated evidence. We also need to be aware of a few common tactics and fallacies that will be used to throw us off in conversations. One is called ad hominem. Anybody know what this is? Yeah, I bet you do. You're very adamant about that hand raise. That is when an argument is rejected based on the person presenting the argument rather than the argument itself. This is a logical fallacy, and it's not accepted in any professional philosophy or debate. But it happens in internet discussions all the time. We need to be aware of this. Example of this is a student is not taken seriously because they're told they do not have a scientific degree or they're not a scientist. Now, can you imagine someone who's not a scientist representing science to the public? I'm trying to figure out if there are other people doing that. Can you think of any? I mean, there's one that's on the tip of my tongue. A glaring example of somebody saying they're a science guy who's not an actual scientist. Clearly, there are plenty of people on both sides who are making scientific arguments who are not scientists. So we need to be aware of this tactic. Another common thing we will run into is something called the presumption of atheism. That is the assumption that atheism is the default position in any argument from the beginning. The question would be, if atheists only constitute 3 to 4% of our population, what makes it the default position? This is a common tactic that is used to put the burden of proof on the believer. But this is not how it works in philosophy. In philosophy, the burden of proof belongs to any person making the claim, regardless of which side that you're on. It's important to understand these tactics. It's important because we can use questions to call them out so that we can establish an even playing field for our discussions. It's also important to understand the core foundational beliefs of each side of the argument. For all of us in here tonight, no matter what your worldview is, it all boils down to one of two things: either belief in naturalism or belief in supernaturalism. Naturalism is belief that only natural laws and forces operate in the world. It is a belief that only the natural world exists. All of us in here tonight believe one of these two things. Now, atheists, I've found, will commonly say they do not believe. Actually, atheism is a belief in naturalism. Now, as believers in here tonight, we believe in supernaturalism. That is, that there is a supernatural being above it all. Now, most atheists also believe in something called scientism. That is, the belief that scientific experiment is the only way to knowledge. But in our last event, we showed that that statement itself is self-defeating. Why? We could demonstrate this with a question. You could ask someone, are you saying that scientific experiment is the only way to knowledge? Then the question would be, what is the scientific experiment that proves that scientific experiment is the only way to knowledge? We can form all of our questions from these foundational beliefs of atheism. Okay, so what I want to do now is tell you first of all, what I am up here doing now is I'm talking about the inconsistencies in a worldview. I'm not talking about a person. I'm not addressing an atheist. I'm addressing atheism. Do you understand that? If you are here tonight, I am glad you're here. I want to talk to you, but I am addressing the fallacies in different worldviews. That is what I am doing. I just want to make sure you know that. So let's talk about naturalism, which is a core foundational belief of atheism. In naturalism, we are merely accidental, purposeless arrangements of matter. Every second of our existence is nothing more than one step closer to oblivion, one step closer to forgottenness and nothingness. In naturalism, there is nothing transcendent. There is nothing spiritual. There is nothing eternal. There is no such thing as a soul. There is only physical matter. As believers, we believe in supernaturalism. We believe that we are a purposeful creation. We are not just matter. We are spiritual beings temporarily housed in matter. As spiritual beings, we transcend matter. We transcend the natural world. Supernatural. Yet, in naturalism, we are nothing more than evolved primates. Those who we've loved and who have passed on, like my mother, they are forever ended. Memories of them exist only briefly in our own dying neurons. And when those neurons die out, it will be as though those people had never existed. Just a blink in a vast history of time, void of any true meaning. In naturalism, consciousness, self-awareness, and love, the very things that make us who we are merely random neuron firings, playing tricks on our under-evolved primate minds. In naturalism, the loved ones who died too soon did no such thing. Because there is no too soon in naturalism. Because there is no objective way that anything should have been or ought to be. There is no purpose. There is no good. There is no evil. There is just matter. Does that sound harsh? A survey from Discovery Institute talks about the impact of evolutionary ideas on faith and ethics. They found that more than 7 in 10 atheists agree that the universe we observe has precisely the properties that we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. According to this, most atheists live their life believing that there is no purpose, no evil, or no good. But I applaud them because at least they understand the logical implications of naturalism. That is, that there is no basis for objective morality. Many intellectual atheists understand this. Brilliant atheist philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche says, morality is neither rational, nor absolute, nor natural. World has known many moral systems, each of which advances claims universality. All moral systems are therefore particular, serving a specific purpose for their propagators or creators. Atheist professor of philosophy Michael Roos puts it like this: He says that God is dead, so why should I be good? The answer is that there are no grounds whatsoever for being good. Morality is flim-flam. He goes on to say that it's something forged in the struggle for existence and reproduction, something fashioned by natural selection. It is as much a natural human adaptation as our ears or noses or teeth or blank. It works and it has no meaning over and above this. This is naturalistically based morality. To believe any different is to be woefully ignorant of the implications of naturalism and therefore atheism. So young people in here tonight, when you speak of tolerance, when you speak of human rights, if morality is flim-flam, if there is no purpose, if there is no good or evil, understand that human rights are predicated on the existence of good and evil and purpose. In naturalism, these things are nothing more than evolutionary byproducts, misfirings in this imperfect glob of tissue that we call our brains, that's crammed into the skull of some particular insignificant group of evolved primates, on some insignificant blink in time, on some insignificant dot, on some insignificant planet that's just an insignificant rock in an insignificant galaxy in a vast, cold, uncaring universe. And since morality is a product of evolution on naturalism, and evolution is ever-changing, what you think is wrong today, what you call human rights today, is just a silly blink in time, a silly passing notion. These notions on naturalism did not exist in the billions of years of the long, cold evolutionary process that created you. They didn't exist 1,000,000 years ago. They didn't exist 100,000 years ago. They didn't exist 10,000 years ago. And though you may think that they are here now, in the grand scheme of time, they are just the current flavor of the day, a blip on the radar, destined to be forgotten when they are redefined by the next group of primates who may decide in the year 2120 that slavery is good, that discrimination against homosexualities is necessary, that incest and pedophilia are okay. But maybe it's not that far away. What I'm going to show you now is where morality based in naturalism leads logically. And I'm going to let you hear it from the mouths of some of the most famous atheists. Check this out.
We pick and choose on the basis of a modern morality which has evolved. You're quite right to say it's evolved. It's evolved for secular reasons, and now with hindsight, having evolved our morality for secular reasons, we can go back to the Bible and we can, as it were, rub out the bits that don't fit with our modern secular morality. Just don't read them anymore, and that's what people do. We pick and choose on the basis of a modern morality which has evolved. You're quite right to say it's evolved. It's evolved for secular reasons, and we can, as it were, rub out the bits that don't fit with our modern secular morality.
Why is incest wrong? It's not clear to me that it's wrong. If a brother and a sister loved each other and used contraception, is there something absolutely morally wrong about that? I'd have to think about it, because I don't think there's any absolute condemnation of that fact. If they love each other and care for each other.
Now, we cannot blame them. Why? Because they're being consistent with the implications of their worldview. In naturalism, we are just chemistry, and chemicals don't just have rights. There is no objective universal obligation when you're a chemical. There's no way that you need to treat people. There is no intrinsic rights for a chemical. It's all subjective to the biological survival of an organism. This is the difference between objective and subjective morality. Now, many people will tell me, no, some things are just wrong. We have certain intrinsic rights, that there are ways that things just ought to be. There are ways that we just ought to treat people. Some things are just wrong, some things are just evil, like torturing a child. I agree. But I can say that logically because I believe that morality is objective, not subjective. Now, what am I talking about when I say objective and subjective? When you say that something is just wrong, it's just wrong, that it's just evil, that means that it's objectively evil, meaning that it's always evil, anywhere in the universe, any place in time. That means it's objectively evil. If it is objectively evil, it was even evil if humans had never existed. That is objective morality. If you believe that, then you believe in objective morality. And here's the deal. Naturalism cannot provide a basis for the existence of objective morality. In naturalism, it's all subjective to each different organism or culture or tribe, based on what feels right to each individual. What's evil in the United States is not evil with ISIS or with Kim Jong-un or with Hitler. Check it out.
To get an idea of subjective morality, let's look at a quote from a famous actor.
In an interview, actor Brad Pitt said, quote, "I have a hard time with morals. All I know is what feels right."
Many people believe that morality should be based on what feels right. Really? Well, to put this in perspective, imagine these same words coming from the mouth of certain other people. People like this.
I have a hard time with morals. All I know is what feels right.
I have a hard time with morals. All I know is what feels right.
I have a hard time with morals. All I know is what feels right.
I have a hard time with morals. All I know is what feels right. All I know is what feels right.
What feels right? What feels right? Feels right.
All I know is what feels right. What feels right.
So, if morality is based on what feels right, then whose version of right do we go with?
Whose version of right do we go with? That is subjective morality. Do you guys see the difference? It means that right and wrong is subjective to any given individual. But a good place to see this is at the Woodlands Mall at Christmas. I remember seeing one of those large Ford SUVs, and it had the reindeer ears and the reindeer nose. It was cute. And so I'm watching this, interaction between this woman driving that vehicle and then this man. And the man pulls into a parking place that she had decided was hers. The flurry of words that came out of her mouth would make my most gangster hip-hop client blush. She was upset. And she said, "That was wrong that you took my place." Of course, she didn't say it like that. He replied with his own flurry, and he said, no, that she was wrong. Who was right? That is subjective morality. Now, atheists assert that knowledge only comes from testable scientific experiment. So the question that we ask when it comes to morality is, what is the scientific experiment that shows that your version of morality is any more true than anyone else's? You see, when I hear questions about morality, and these are serious questions, and I don't mean to make light of it, but when I hear questions from kids about things like transgender, when I hear questions about gay rights, I will never talk about a specific moral behavior before I ask you, what is the basis for morality that you're using in the first place? Because let me tell you, that will answer a lot of questions. What is the basis? Well, people will say, no, we just have rights. We have rights to be this way. This is the way I feel. I have rights to be that way. I will ask you, where do those rights come from? Where? Are they floating around? Do we just kind of grab a right? Maybe they're just in our DNA. Maybe certain groupings of DNA, like me, I'm a grouping of DNA. Maybe my grouping of DNA just intrinsically has rights. Well, that means if I spit right here on the ground, does my spit have the same rights as me? It carries the same DNA, the same biological makeup. Do you understand that? Just because you hear something in the media, just because your friends believe it, does not make it logical. It does not make it true. On naturalism, things like women's rights, things like tolerance, they are baseless. Baseless. Why? Because it's all subjective to any given culture, to any given individual at any given time. And trying to navigate a world where morality is subjective is like trying to navigate in a forest when north is subjective. Check this out.
Here's the story of two men. This is Bill. This is Bill. They are lost in the forest. Bill says this way is north. Bill disagrees. He says north is this way. How will they ever find true north without a compass? You see, north is not subjective to our opinion. It is objective. And if north was subject to opinion, how would we ever know where we were going?
We just assume that we do have some internal compass.
So let's talk about morality.
Where then does humanity find the points of objective reference? Who defines good and evil?
In the absence of God, there isn't any reason, any explanation for the existence of objective moral values. Without God, there isn't any absolute standard of right and wrong, and therefore what we call moral values are just the spin-offs of sociobiological evolution.
I've read all the great moral philosophers, including Dr. Seuss. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche believed that morality is just a fiction used by the herd of inferior human beings to hold back the few superior men. It's worth noting that he died of syphilis.
So if you believe that something is just wrong, or just evil, regardless of time, culture, or even human existence, then clearly you believe that moral values are objective. And I think most people live their lives as if they are. They believe that they exist outside of time, place, and human existence. But that means something very important, because objective moral values must come from somewhere. They necessitate an objective moral law giver who is outside of time, matter, and human existence. And this realization is so powerful that it is perhaps the reason there has been a resurgence of Christian philosophy in Europe, so powerful that it has caused many intellectual atheists to abandon their atheism. Take Leah Librisco. She is known as one of the most prominent atheist bloggers on the internet, a brilliant writer, a graduate of Yale. But it was the existence of objective morality that drove her away from atheism and to Christianity. And she says it this way. She says, I cannot explain why morality exists. I cannot explain it. She says that it's something that we uncover like archaeologists, not something that we build like architects. Wow. Morality is something we uncover, that we discover, not that we build. That's amazing. Because if we discover it, how did it get there? Who built it? This demands an answer. This will not go away. It will not go away. So young people in here tonight, understand this. It's either one or the other. There is no middle. Our culture today lives in this non-existent middle, but it does not exist. That's all in your head. It's either one way or the other. Morality is either a subjective, baseless, confused free-for-all, or it is objective, unchanging, unwavering, and immovable. Which one do you want to live by? I'll leave that up to you. Objective moral values must come from somewhere else. Your very Declaration of Independence says that we are endowed by our Creator with these certain rights. Let me tell you this. There is a reason they did not say that we were endowed by chemistry. There's a reason they didn't say that we were endowed by matter. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you where morality based in naturalism eventually leads, logically. It's called determinism. Does anybody know what determinism is? Determinism is belief that all of our actions, all of our decisions are not our choice. Not our choice. They are predetermined by the laws of nature. You didn't choose to come here tonight. You didn't choose to say that to your girlfriend, which might be a good excuse for you. You didn't choose any of it. You did not choose anything in your life. None of it. That is determinism. In the words of two of the world's leading atheists who you will hear, you have no choice, you have no free will. The results? No one, not even murderers, are responsible for their actions. Check it out.
So I'm a determinist. I basically believe that at any one point in time, it's completely the configuration of molecules in the universe, and in particular in your brain, that mandates what you do, and that you could not have done anything other than you did. In other words, you don't have any choices. You don't have any choices.
This is determinism, where we are nothing more than robots made out of meat.
You don't believe that you're robots made out of meat, which is what I'm going to try to convince you of today.
And as you follow the logic of determinism, it leads to the belief that there is no free will.
And I'm so glad you're here, and you are a non-believer.
Yes. Now, the popular conception of free will seems to rest on two assumptions. Okay, the first is that each of us was free to think and act differently than we did in the past. The second assumption is that you are the conscious source of your thoughts and actions. Now, unfortunately, we know that both of these assumptions are false. I hope to convince you that free will is an illusion.
And if there is no free will, then this inevitably leads to the cold truth that no one, even murderers, are responsible for their actions.
Consider you're a generic murderer. Okay, his choice to commit his last murder was preceded by a certain pattern of electrochemical activity in his brain. The moment we catch sight of this stream of causes, the sense of his culpability disappears, that the place where we would place our blame disappears.
No criminal has a choice about what they do when they do the crime. It is the result of their genes and their environment. No criminal has a choice about what they do.
So ask yourself this question. Do you really have no free will? Are you just a robot made out of meat?
World-famous atheist Richard Dawkins proclaimed that the state needs to protect children from religion and their parents. Protect children. Now, do you suppose that these are the same children that he was referring to when he said this, quote, "Any fetus is less human than an adult pig." Same kids? Referring to the same kids? So this brings us to some questions. If pigs are more human than a human fetus, I don't know. Maybe they need to change the headline to something different, like, we need to protect pigs from religion and our parents. I think it looks better. Once again, in these situations, what do? We ask questions. We ask questions. How do you know that a pig is more human than a human fetus? What scientific experiment proves this? Is there one? You see, these are the kind of comments that we hear. But it's really kind of random and there's no basis to it. I mean, that's like me saying any boy band is less musical than any 80s rock band. Both statements carry the same amount of truth, which is 0. It's subjective. Although some of you may agree with my statement more. I don't know. In this article, he and other atheists are talking about evolution. They're saying that parents should not shield their children from the evidence. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. But they should see all of the evidence. And this brings us to evolution. In our event, Evolution in God, we talked about this word evolution and how we should not be so afraid of this word. So many Christians say, I won't talk about that with my kids. Do not be afraid of evolution. Embrace the word. Why? Because evolution has many different meanings. And only a few of these meanings actually present a potential problem to our beliefs. So what do we do when we hear this word evolution? What do? Ask a question. Define exactly. What do you mean by evolution? If they're talking about a species adapting to an environment over time, ching, thumbs up, I agree, proof for it. If they're talking about bacteria becoming antibiotic resistant, cha-ching, right on the money, Bob. We have proof for that. It's called microbial evolution. But if when they say evolution, they mean non-living chemicals giving rise to life and then evolving into humans. This is far different. This is a different planet. And there is no proof that that ever happened, even though you hear it on the Science Channel. Through many events, and you can check them all out, and I suggest you see them. For the many events, we have pulled back the curtain on the weakness for the idea of evolution from inorganic chemicals transforming into life and then to sophisticated systems like an eye and a brain and consciousness and eventually you. We showed serious problems and lack of evidence for Darwinian evolution. We showed that Science Magazine announced an $8.7 million project seeking an evolution rethink. In Brazil, Norway, Germany, Spain, and Finland, National Academy scientists are coming forward denouncing evolution and supporting intelligent design. Now there is a signed document by many highly esteemed, high-credentialed scientists called Descent from Darwin. It's signed by over 1,000 high-level PhDs and professors from the most prestigious universities in the world, who all agree that neo-Darwinian evolution fails to account for the complexity of life. There are many books written on the subject, like Evolution, A Theory in Crisis by Michael Denton, a PhD at King's College. We also talked about the Tree of Life, which is a foundation for Darwinian evolution, how scientists say that Darwin was wrong about it. Evolutionist Michael Rose says that the Tree of Life is being politely buried and our whole fundamental view of biology needs to change. Evolutionary biologist Eric Baptiste says we have no evidence at all that the Tree of Life is a reality. Even New Scientist magazine had a cover called Darwin Was Wrong, Cutting Down the Tree of Life. This is a foundation for Darwinian evolution. It's a foundation, and it's been cut down. Now, if there's all these problems with the theory, do you think that these problems should at least be discussed in schools? Well, most Americans believe they should. A new survey from Discovery Institute showed that an overwhelming 93% of American adults agree that teachers and students should have the academic freedom to objectively discuss both the scientific strengths and weaknesses of the theory of evolution. But the free-thinking left do not want these differing views discussed, even though they are willing to allow certain alternative other views discussed, like, for instance, terrorism. In a New York Post article called "Colleges Brainwash Students into Believing 9/11 is Our Fault," the New York Post says that American-hating leftist professors are systematically indoctrinating them into believing that it's all our fault, that the U.S. deserved the punishment. They are referring to a freshman college curriculum at major universities called The Literature of 9/11 that focuses almost entirely on the perspective of Islamic terrorists instead of the lives of the victims that they killed. But I want you to listen to how they replied. Freshmen should be exposed to differing points of view, even radical ones. Differing points of view, okay? Fair enough. Then what about allowing the students to hear differing points of view on other topics, like evolution or global warming? What do you think? How do you think that they would react to students hearing different points of view on these subjects? How do you think? Here it is. Republican anti-science bill targets children in 4 states. Wow, targeting children. Why do they say that? Because they say Republicans are advancing legislation that would protect teachers who teach the controversy on global warming and evolution. From that, they say that these teachers are targeting children. Anybody see anything wrong with that? So let's get it straight. Let's just get it straight here. When you teach a student to sympathize with terrorists, it's called being exposed to different points of view. But if you dare even talk about the many documented problems with evolution, it's called targeting children. Does anybody see an inconsistency there? Evolution is a holy grail that can't be touched. Growing up, I used to watch science shows with my father, who was a scientist. We would see amazing discoveries on the universe and the human body and would be happy and blown away, and then suddenly in the same breath, they would inject what he called the evolution narrative. It was just kind of injected into the evidence instead of flowing from the evidence. We would see these amazing things, and then just suddenly we would be told how the eye just evolved. This is why my father, if you knew him, my sisters can vouch for this, did not like to watch the TV with the volume on. He didn't. Because in the midst of proven, testable science, they would insert the evolution narrative as if it were fact. And today we hear many narratives, many convincing voices telling us all kinds of things. But let me tell you, just because you hear a convincing voice does not make it a fact. Here are some examples. Check it out.
Nature's battleground. Out of this conflict, an extraordinary weapon has evolved. One that forever changed the rules of engagement between predators and prey. It is one of evolution's greatest achievements. The eye.
Fossil finds have filled in some of the many blanks in the story of our evolution, allowing only glimpses of how we slowly changed over millions of years. From ape to human.
Humans. The dominant life form on Earth. A 7 billion strong, planet-wide race of space-traveling bipedal apes.
One man, one book, in a world that is changing. Richard Dawkins and his unchallenged masterpiece, The God Delusion.
In a world where faith and science face off in an epic battle, we have now witnessed the final triumph of science over faith. Proof of monkeys transforming into humans, land animals transforming into whales. The answer is clear. There is no God. And now, at last, we will witness the ultimate proof. Are you ready? Well, we don't actually have the proof, but I have a really powerful, epic movie trailer voice, and that is very convincing. I speak very epically. I don't even know if epically is a word, but Daryl told me to say it. He said, speak like a movie trailer guy. So I did. I needed the gig. My last job was a janitorial position at a kid's water park. Lots of mystery substances. Anyway, science. Please cue the epic movie music. Science has rendered the ultimate death blow to faith. Behold, the evolution of creatures to humans. Well, these are actually all made by a motion graphics guy who probably has no idea about evolution. But it looks like what it probably would have looked like if it really did happen, so it probably did happen. Probably. That's kind of confusing. Wait a minute. Is that flutes in the background? I don't speak over flutes. Please cue the epic movie music. Thank you. Look at these epic titles. We can even add fire and sparks for added epicness. Again, I don't know if that's a word, but it doesn't matter because my voice is so massively powerful. And if you're wondering if I talk at home this way, the answer is yes. I say, honey, did you feed the cat? Anyway, remember, whether or not a statement is true, it doesn't matter. When Movie Trailer Guy says it, you can believe it.
I love epic movie trailer guy. Be careful what you believe. As a scientist who understood how biology works at the molecular level, when my father would hear that the eye evolved, he would say, do they have any idea what they're saying? Do they have any idea what they're talking about? Do they have any idea what it takes to even make a single protein? Do they have any idea about DNA synthesis, or how molecules are made, or what it even takes to create a simple cell, molecule by molecule, let alone something like eyesight or a brain? And I will tell you, he knew what he was talking about. He had a PhD in the very subject that is at the core of evolutionary theory, organic chemistry. Darwin said, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down, but I can find no such case. The problem here is that in Darwin's time, there was no understanding of the molecular world. In those days, a cell was referred to as a microscopic lump of jelly-like substance. But now we know that the cell is like a city, far more advanced than anything that we have ever created. Darwin had no idea about cellular biology. He had no idea about chemistry. He had no idea about biophysics, or neurons, or photoreceptors, or neural pathways. He had no idea about DNA synthesis, genetics, or what has to happen to even create a single simple cell. So let's talk about one of these complex organs, the human eye, the very organ that Darwin used to interpret the world. Your eye is composed of more than 2 million working parts. And though it only accounts for about 1/4 of 1,000th of your weight, it is responsible for processing 80% of the information that you take in from the world. It can detect light as dim as a single photon and then quickly adjust to bright sunlight. Your eye has built-in systems like auto iris and autofocus. 1 square millimeter of your retina contains 400,000 specialized optical sensors. Your eyes can distinguish over 10 million different color surfaces and take in more information than the largest telescope known to man. Your eyes can process 500,000 messages simultaneously. Scientists have found that it would take a minimum of 100 years of Cray supercomputer time to simulate what takes place in your eye many times each second. And yet your eye does this using exponentially less power, far more efficiency, and design. There's even an article from Berkeley called "Why the Eye is Better Than a Camera." In fact, if you had to assess the value of your eye based on modern technology, according to Premium Beat, your eye would run $35 million plus tax. $35 million for a set of these babies. Any film buffs in here tonight? Guys that know about film? Yeah? You would know that most film runs between 24 and 29 frames per second. Your eyes can interpret footage at 1,000 frames per second. Now, we all have digital cameras, we all have cool little phones. Average consumer digital cameras and phones they can see resolutions about 5 to 20 million pixels. Your eye can see at a resolution of 576 million pixels. Guys, the only thing close to that is a dark energy camera, and that's gonna run you about $30 million. But unlike a camera lens, your retina is like a computer all of its own. Richard Robinson of the University of Berkeley compares the retina to a computer running Photoshop, given the extent of the image processing that it performs. Robert Jastrow, who holds a PhD from Columbia University, says that the eye appears to have been designed. No designer of telescopes could have done better. How could this marvelous instrument have evolved by chance through a succession of random events? He confessed that there seems to be no direct proof that evolution can work these miracles. It's hard to accept the evolution of the eye as a product of chance. Here is a little video about the eye. Check it out.
The human eye. It's been called the window of the soul. Its breathtaking design, has fascinated even the most brilliant minds. Even Charles Darwin marveled at its wonder. In his famous Origin of Species, he said,
"To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree."
The human eye is composed of more than 2 million working parts. It can distinguish up to 10 million color surfaces. It is capable of detecting a single photon. The retina works like a miniature brain. It is equipped with fiber optics. It has advanced microscopic machinery. It uses advanced edge recognition, complex data processing, sophisticated autofocus. But the eye itself is not enough for vision. It is connected to a complex neurological network and sent to the brain, where vision actually takes place. Each eye has about 120 million rods and 6 million cones, more advanced than any machine. Many people compare the eye to a camera, but the eye far surpasses them. Most modern digital cameras range from 5 to 20 million pixels, yet the human eye is 576 million pixels. They calculate data at 600,000 bits per second, and the eye's dynamic range is even more breathtaking. Modern photographic film has a dynamic range of only about 1,000 to 1, yet the human eye has a dynamic range of more than 10 million to 1. Greater than any film or consumer camera. The human eye represents a complexity and efficiency of design not found in our most advanced inventions. The amazingly sophisticated systems that account for human vision point strongly to design. And where there is design, there is a designer.
So as you saw in the video, there's a little bit bigger problem for the evolution of the eye. We've all heard the phrase, out of sight, out of mind. But when it comes to the eye, it might be better said, out of mind, out of sight. I remember going to the eye doctor. I don't know if you know, but I can't see hardly what. My font is like 20 on this thing, okay? I remember going to the doctor, to the eye doctor, to get fitted for contact lenses. And so he wanted to try what's called monovision. Anybody know what monovision is? Yeah, that's the same way I felt. It's one contact instead of two, okay? So he puts it in my eye, and immediately my vision is completely blurred. I can't see anything. I'm like, how am I gonna drive home like this? And so he says, look, don't worry about it. Your brain will adjust. I said, well, that's kind of strange. And he said, no, listen to me, Daryl. You don't see with your eyes, you see with your brain. And he said, check this out. He said, look at my finger. And I'm watching his finger, and he puts it down by his leg, and he says, look at it. So I'm looking down at the finger in his leg. And he says, is something missing? And I said, I don't know, I must be missing it, Doc, I guess. He goes, your nose is missing. I said, what do you mean? And he's like, your nose is right in the field of vision, and your brain has removed it. In fact, you always see your nose, and your brain removes it. You don't see with your eyes, you see with your brain. And this is profound. This is a huge problem for evolution, because that's true. The eye alone is not enough for vision. It has to be connected to something. If you're getting dressed in a room and there were a bunch of just random camera lenses, would you feel like you're being watched? No, but I guarantee you, if they were connected to a computer, you'd be getting dressed pretty quick. So we all know this. If a camera lens magically forms in a forest by itself, is it seeing anything? No, it's not seeing anything because it would be worthless unless it were connected to something, unless the visual data was interpreted as a vision. This is a huge problem for evolution. Not only do you need an eye, but you need a brain, and you need all the neurological pathways to connect the two. And it turns out that the way you see is amazing. Your eyes actually send 12 different movies to your brain. One movie is simply the drawing of the edges of objects. Other movies contain just motion information. Other movies contain only shadow and highlight information, all predetermined to later be processed by the brain. Tell me how you evolved that. Multiple independent systems functioning for a single predetermined purpose. Any engineers in here, like Reggie, will tell you that requires forethought. Forethought. To explain this, where's my man? To explain how sight works, I chose a lovely audience member. Stand up for me, Fernando. Yeah! Okay, so all I want you to do, Fernando's gonna make a face, and you're just gonna look at it and take it in. So make your face. That's it. Okay, sit down. You can go. You can sit down. That's all you needed, okay? So what this is, did you see his face? Very briefly, you saw the face, right? Okay, what did it take for you to process that face? Lucy's gonna tell you.
This is how we see. First, the eyes take in light from Fernando. Then, the retina scans, and then converts the light information to nerve impulses. Each eye splits the image in half. Everything seen by the right half of each eye is separated from everything seen by the left half. Everything seen by the right half of each eye is then sent to the left occipital lobe. Everything seen by the left half of each eye is sent to the right. Your brain takes this upside down, turned around, split up collection of nerve impulses and provides us with what we experience as vision. This requires millions of advanced neurological connections and pathways. How it's able to accomplish this remains entirely unknown.
Did not ask us to applaud for my man, Fernando. I'm so proud of him. Awesome. So Darwin's question was oversimplified. It was oversimplified. Because to explain the origin of vision, you have to explain a lot more than eyes. John Hay puts it like this. Even if there is an eye, it would be useless unless the organism has the neural and or the mental processes to utilize the information perceived by the eye. How can a chance mutation provide this complexity in several different structures? Different structures. This should make you very, very skeptical of someone going around telling you how it evolved when we don't know how it works. Now let's put this in perspective. In our day and age, we still don't know who shot John F. Kennedy. We were there. We filmed it. But it gets even worse for evolution. David Berlinski, who holds a PhD from Princeton, says, and no theory has anything whatsoever to say of interest about the fact that the visual system terminates its activities in a visual experience, an episode of consciousness. We cannot characterize the most obvious fact about sight, that it involves seeing something. What he's talking about, a visual experience, that means what it's like to experience vision, what it's like. Do you understand? Unlike a physical eyeball, what it's like to experience vision is a conscious state. This requires self-agency. In our event, God, Mind, and Morality, we've seen that a conscious state is not a physical thing. In fact, scientists don't even know what it is. It's not a physical thing. It cannot be measured, weighed, or tested. Remember that natural selection only works in the natural world. So our question would be very simple. What is the evidence that a purely physical, natural process created something non-physical? Where's the evidence? Now, guys, just assuming, if you're here tonight, just assuming that someone out there has explained this is not enough. It does not make it true. Seek it out for yourself. Critical thinking. If you believe that the eye evolved despite not knowing the evidence, then the Christian is not the only person in the room with faith. Darwin was not even close to understanding the question that he asked. The question should not have been, how can natural selection form an eye? It should have been, how can natural selection form an eyeball, a retina, which is a computer, the neurological pathways, the brain lobes, and the conscious states that are necessary for sight? That's the right question. But yet we are told that natural selection through mutation did this. And we looked very in depth at this process in our last event.
You only need 3 forces in place. Those are reproduction, mutation, and selection. This is how, over time, evolution creates something like a brain or an eyeball. This is how, over time, evolution creates something like a brain or an eyeball.
So he lists reproduction, mutation, and selection, okay? We all know reproduction. I hope everybody in here knows about reproduction. If you don't know that, you've got bigger problems. So we're going to talk about mutation and selection, all right? What is mutation? Mutation is an error in the gene, all right? If this error happens and it offers an advantage, then it gets selected by nature. That's what he's talking about here. Each little mutation, each one has to offer an advantage. So if you want to evolve a brain or an eyeball, the finished brain and the finished eyeball must not just offer an advantage, but each molecular step leading to the brain and the eyeball, they must offer an advantage. If it takes 1 trillion mutations, every step from 1 to 1 trillion must all offer an advantage. This is natural selection through mutation. They are saying that this is the process responsible for creating everything. You, your girlfriend, your emotions, that fight you had. This is the way everything was created. But you see the problem from the video, right? Even if these self-replicating molecules ever did mutate towards becoming an eye, how does a blind, undirected process ever know that it's making an eye without the forethought of sight? How do you go in that direction without a predetermined goal? How does it know its target? Dr. Tour addresses this.
To what do we target? So remember nature's problem here. You want to make a functional system. You don't know what to build to make it. You've never seen the target before. It is intellectually baffling as to how nature could have progressed toward complex functional systems.
Dr. James Tour, he's among the 50 most influential scientists in the world today. He's ranked one of the top 10 chemists in the past decade in the world.
I've asked all of my colleagues, National Academy members, Nobel Prize winners. Nobody understands this. So if your professors say it's all worked out, your teachers say it's all worked out, they don't know what they're talking about. It is not worked out. You cannot just refer this to somebody else. They don't know what they're talking about.
Isaac Newton saw this way back when, and he put it more simply. He said this: was the eye contrived without skill in optics, and the ear without knowledge of sounds? And these things being rightly dispatched, does it not appear from the phenomenon that there is a being incorporeal, living, and intelligent? It's easy just to say that molecules will mutate and become an eye. But what we find when we look for the evidence is that it doesn't exist. But you know what? Let's make this simple on them. Forget eyes, forget brains. Let's talk about a simple protein. What are the chances these forces could create even just one single protein? Hubert Yockey, who founded the field of information theory that applies to molecular biology, he used cytochrome C. This is considered a model protein for molecular evolution. When he did it, he said it would take 10 to the 23 years at one chance per second to produce even one protein. Folks, based on the current age of the Earth, that is less than 1/trillionth of the time needed to produce even a single one of these proteins. He sums it up with this statement. He says, the belief that any protein could appear by chance is based on faith. One protein, not a brain, not an eye, one protein. Now, that's one protein. Consider now that there are around 100,000 different proteins in the average cell. Now consider this. You have 94 million cells in your retina. Now consider this. You have 86 billion brain cells. You do the math. We are told that an unguided process created eyeballs and brains with no forethought and no intelligence. And so when we talk about evolution, this is where you bring the conversation. How did you come to the conclusion? What is the empirical evidence? Now, another thing that we're going to hear a lot, is that the eyes are badly designed. Anybody heard this? Yeah, it's a very common one. We have badly designed eyes, therefore we either have a really bad designer or he doesn't exist, all right? So, what do we do in these situations? We ask questions. We ask those questions, that's right. So, what would the question be? What bad designs are you referring to? Which bad designs? Well, I'm going to tell you a couple of favorites. One is that the eye is wired backwards. And number two is that we have a blind spot. So, I'm going to give you a spoiler. Actual ophthalmologists, eye experts, have actually denounced these claims over and over. But we're going to deal with them. We're going to deal with them just a little bit right now. So, first let's talk about this eye being wired backwards. Okay, what does that mean? Basically, they're saying that the retina is back to front. And so the nerves are in front, so they say that this obstructs light. You guys have probably heard this a lot on the internet. Well, what do the experts say? Dr. George Marshall, who has a PhD in ophthalmic science, says the idea that the eye is wired backwards comes from a lack of knowledge of eye function. Why does he say that? Because this, quote, backward wiring actually improves oxygen flow and blood supply necessary to regenerate photoreceptors. What about the idea that the nerves obstruct the light? Well, this has also been falsified by research at major universities. Why? Because the eye has built-in features, amazing features that compensate for the nerves being in front. Kate McAlpine, who's a writer for New Scientist magazine, that is by far not a Christian magazine, says that this quote-unquote backwards wiring in the eye actually improves vision. And that was after their magazine listed it as one of evolution's biggest mistakes. Ironically, researchers even use this bad design to help improve camera designs. What about the blind spot? You guys all know that. We have a blind spot. So let's talk about the science of it. Actually, your blind spot only occupies about 0.25% of your visual field. But guess what? You got two eyes. Ophthalmologist Peter Gurney says having two eyes effectively means that there's no blind spot. But let's live with the one eye. What if you just have one eye? What about the blind spot? Well, people with one eye are not even considered handicapped enough to not drive. So it's not that big a deal. So this leads to another couple of sound bites that you will run into on the internet. Okay? And that is the claim that, well, other animals have better designed eyes than we do. Like the octopus has a better designed eye than we do because they don't have a blind spot. Now, I try to have patience with this one because I don't really get the point. But it's a big one that's used. I mean, a lot of kids I talk to, they hear this. And so what did we, remember we had two questions that we asked, right? What's the first one? Remember? Okay, what do you mean by that? So when we ask this, what do you mean by that question? What it does is it makes them clarify their question, okay? So sometimes when you have to clarify your question, you almost hear the logic flawed within that. Have you ever done that? And so what I would do in a situation is say, so let me get this right. Are you saying that if there's a designer, I should have a better eye than an octopus? Is that what you're saying? Now, are they going to say yes? I mean, is that actually a point? Yes. If there's a designer, you should have a better eye than an octopus. I don't understand the argument, but that's fine. Then we say, well, how did you arrive at that conclusion? How did you arrive at that conclusion? Is there a law in the universe that says if there's a designer, I am supposed to have better eyes than an octopus? Is there such a law? No. Do you see how the logic unravels with just a simple question? I build computers for lots of different functions. I build them for RDOF, I build them for video companies, I build them for recording studios. I build computers for people, I think, that have them in here. I don't know if Steve's here or not. If I build one computer with better video capability than another computer, does that mean I didn't design them? Does that mean I did not have a specific purpose for them? No. Do you see how this line of argumentation falls apart with a little logic? But let's deal with the science. This is all a moot point. You know why? Because the supposed better eye design of octopuses doesn't matter because we actually see better than they do. So there's really no point. But we wanted to be thorough. We ask questions. And so where does this leave us tonight after all of this? Where does this leave us? Today, in our culture, we are told that reason and critical thinking belong to those who do not believe. But in our last event, we saw that the very pioneers of science believed in God. And today, Pew Research shows that 51% of scientists believe in a higher power. As a scientist, my father always told me, never be afraid of the evidence. Never be afraid of it. Dive in. The evidence will tell you the story. Atheist Darren Raspberry, who's a writer for the blog Debunking Christianity, actually became a Christian because of this evidence. He says, I grew tired of the lack of explanation for the existence of the universe, moral values and duties, objective human worth, consciousness and will, and many other topics. As I fought so desperately to come up with refutations of these arguments, even going out of my way to personally meet many of their originators, defenders, and opponents, I realized that I could not answer them no matter how many long nights I spent hitting the books. He goes on to say that line after line after line of people hating Christianity and laughing at its lie when solid scholarship refuting their idea was ignored completely. It showed that the motive of bashing and hating Christianity for some skeptics wasn't based in reason and free thinking at all. Reason and free thinking. And understand, he could not answer the question. That's why questions are so important. So if you're in here tonight and somebody invited you and you don't believe, if you're an atheist, does lack of answers to questions prove there is a God? No, it doesn't. But it reveals something. It reveals that you believe something without evidence. This defies the very foundation of your worldview, which means you have a lot of thinking to do. I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but you have a lot of thinking to do. It turns out, in my experience, that it ends up being faith for all of us. Faith for all of us. Either faith in an intelligent creator or faith in a random process like naturalism and evolution. But both require faith. Tonight, we have seen that naturalism offers no basis for the objective moral values that we all live by. And in naturalism, there is no basis for human value. In fact, according to atheist Peter Singer, professor of Princeton, the life of a newborn is of less value than the life of a pig, a dog, or a chimpanzee. Now, I don't understand what the fixation with pigs is. But in all seriousness, this is where human value is on naturalism. I want you to see a video of a girl who faces this realization when she is asked why it is wrong for a guy to hurt her.
But is that evil?
Again, relative to me, that is evil, but to
if
him,
if
that's fine.
If he hurts you,
I wouldn't like that. I would stab him back.
okay, but because he's offending you in some way, is he hurting you in some way? Do you have some value or dignity he's hurting? With your atheism,
nerves that flow through my body.
Yeah, I know it may be painful.
Pain.
I mean, it may be painful, but
I don't have a dignity that he's hurting.
Right? So you have no value.
Yeah. Yes.
You do or don't?
I do not have value. I'm irrelevant to the universe. I'm just a speck of dust.
Okay. So ultimately, your atheism leaves you with no basis for good or evil, and it leaves you with no value and no dignity.
Yes.
And that's what's true.
Yes. Not have value. I'm irrelevant to the universe. I'm just a speck of dust. I do not have value. I'm irrelevant to the universe. I'm just a speck of dust.
Everything she said is true based on her atheism. But I don't believe it's true. I believe that she has value. I believe that you have value. Most atheists that I meet live as if humans do have value, especially ones with children. They believe that there is a way that things ought to be. They believe that there are objective moral values that are intrinsic in all of us. I am not saying that atheists cannot be good people. What I'm saying is that on atheism, there is no logical foundation for these moral values. Theodore Roosevelt says that every thinking man, when he thinks, realizes that the teachings of the Bible are so interwoven and entwined with our whole civic and social life that it would be literally impossible for us to figure ourselves what that life would be if these standards were removed. We would lose almost all the standards by which we now judge both public and private morals. For all of us in here, there is an objective moral law that is written on our hearts. If it is written on our hearts, it must have had a writer. Romans 2:15 says, they demonstrate that God's law is written on their hearts, for their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them that they are doing right. Now that makes sense. That makes sense. Tonight, this moral law that is written on our hearts, on your heart, points to a moral law giver that lives outside of time and matter. And if you're an atheist or a non-believer tonight, I believe that this law has been written on your heart by your Creator, His very evidence inside of you. And when we look at the best explanations for what we have seen tonight, the evidence points to something much bigger than naturalism and materialism. And guys, if this is true, this changes everything. It changes everything about who you thought you were, who you are, and why you're here. Because when we look at the best explanation for the evidence of the intricate forethought and design of brains and eyes, it points to a brilliant architect for life. When we look at the best explanation for the exquisite fine-tuning of the universe and the advanced DNA information in our bodies, it points to a powerful designer. When we look for the best explanation for the consciousness and self-awareness and love that you have here tonight, it points to a living, conscious, personal creator. A creator who is morally aware, and a creator who tends to want a relationship with his creation, you. If you're here tonight and you don't believe, or if you have lost your faith, I don't believe it's an accident that you're here. I believe you're supposed to be here. I believe that you are being pursued tonight by your Creator with the evidence. A Creator who sees you with value, who sees you as significant, and a Creator who loves you enough to give His life for you. And I'm going to ask you, even if you do not believe, call out to Him. In your disbelief, call out to Him. Just try. Allow Him to reveal Himself to you, because I think He's already doing it. Tonight, if you walked in here You weren't sure, and now you kind of feel like you're supposed to be here. I believe you're right. I believe you are. Call out to him. If you walked in here not a believer and now you think, this is making sense to me, maybe I do believe, call out to him. Come talk to one of us. If you're here and you have questions or you're doubting, that is why I'm here. That is why I'm here. That's why Pastor Reggie is here. I have my friend Bruce. I think he's here somewhere. We're here to talk to you guys. Please come up to us. Please come talk to us. It's been my pleasure to be with every one of you guys. I'm going to leave you with a very special video.
My name is Aina. I'm a former atheist, and in fact I would actually refer to myself as an evangelistic atheist. My family, we had some really traumatic events between people with suicide and depression, and I guess it was at that point that I was like, there's no way there's a God up there, because he wouldn't allow this stuff to happen. From there, I moved into, I guess, atheism. I was just totally opposed to any idea that there was a God. It was, to me, just totally pointless. If someone shared their faith or with me or what they believed in, I would really take it upon myself to try completely talk them and logic and rationalize them out of that belief. Massive idols for me were Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. If you believed in God, probably the first thing I personally felt was just anger. And genuinely, I can't express, I think, harshly enough just how stupid I thought you were. When I would come at people with like evolution arguments and basic science, they just would have absolutely no answers for any of these things. Being a sports scientist, I was like, you guys, you just can't give me anything right now. Anything that could possibly move me in the way of believing that there's a God. They wouldn't be able to explain the process of evolution for me, so I'd be like, you can't even explain this, so why should I take what you're saying in these areas as true? You're just an idiot. I think what began to kind of open my mind up a little bit is when I met my now fiance, who was a Christian. Within the first week, she did bring me over to her parents, and they were all, her parents were Christians, her whole family were Christian, and I'm sure they knew I didn't have a relationship or didn't believe in God, but didn't make a difference to them. They just loved me, they embraced me, they were just amazing people, and I knew at that moment that what I believed about people who believed in God was wrong. I eventually decided to go to church with them. The speaker was one of the lead research scientists at Trinity College in Dublin, which is one of the most prestigious colleges in Europe. I just remember being so just perplexed by this idea that there's a scientist up there, and it doesn't inhibit him at all in his job. It was extremely confusing to me. It really made me think I need to understand what I actually personally believe. So I continued reading the Bible. I'm reading about Jesus. I'm not just getting a picture of what Jesus is from other people. I'm actually reading what it says about him. And I'm not saying at this point I believed in God or believed in any of the miracles or any of that, but what I could say was that this guy Jesus is a remarkable dude. And so I really was definitely, I guess for the first time, actually impressed with what I read in the Bible, as opposed to just angered and confused. And so the resurrection, even still, it was I was at a point where, okay, maybe, as opposed to no, let's just accept Jesus is outstanding. Going forward, like this whole confusion, and then it just got into the sense, am I just doing this because of my now fiance? And all these things would come into my head, and I didn't know where I was really with what I truly believed. So I started to do Christian things, talking a little bit differently, avoiding any sort of atheist because I just didn't have any answer for them. And I can't really say that this is so real. Like God is real. I couldn't, like, even though I made that commitment, it's like the more I read the Bible, the less I believed. I was like, surely that's backwards. I remember just sitting on my sofa and hurt, angry. And then I remember right in that moment, a voice came into my head as I was thinking about just how awful these things were, and I just couldn't do it, and all these things that I just couldn't believe. A voice just came into my mind and said to me, who are you proving yourself to? And it cut to the core of me, and I just broke down crying. Specifically for that moment, there is not one person alive that could tell me what happened there, that could rationally explain that in some scientific sense. And from that moment, I was like, this is real. This is amazing. This is, wow, God is actually good. I'm right now experiencing how awesome He is. And then all the Bible, everything, all the miracles, everything, it just made sense. Of course He could do that. He could change my life with a question. I remember that week being like, I need to get away. God, I want to get away and I want to get to know You better. I want to talk to You. So I went on a trip. I actually went to Port Aransas by myself, turned the phone off. I remember one particular night, I'd been asking God, show me these lies. Reveal these lies to me that I've been believing. And from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m., I was writing on my iPad sporadically and not having a clue what I was writing until afterwards it was finished and I read it. Once again, I'm like, how can I explain this? If I say this to any of my atheist friends, they are going to think I've lost my mind. But it's the truth. I can't explain what happened. It was amazing. And so from this point on, having been in a kind of position where I was like, I would say I was a Christian, but if they were atheists, I'd probably just be like, to being in this position now where I'm like, this is the truth. I know this is for real. After He revealed Himself to me, I had this completely open mind to go back and say, okay, well, let's look at the evidence. If I've experienced that this is the truth, so there has to be evidence for the truth. So I went back and did that, and that's why RDOF is so powerful, because it shows, and I guess if I could sum it up in a word, it humbled me. Incredibly humbling, because it really showed me how little I knew about what I believed as an atheist. So this is the first time really I'm actually looking and pursuing rationale and logic and truth from a perspective of theism. And with the likes of what I've experienced with RDOF, it's amazing. It's truly amazing that there is evidence there. If you come to one of these events and you're willing to talk with Christians and hear their point of view, I promise you are already more open-minded than I was. And that's encouraging for you. So I would continue to encourage you to keep seeking the truth. It even says in the Bible, if you seek the truth, you'll find the truth. If you're a Christian, don't be afraid of someone if they're an atheist. Love these people. Just because they don't believe what you believe. Continue to be in relationship, be friends with these people. They are looking for answers, and the truth has the answers for them.